the measure that you use for one another, the big or the little, is what we're asking God. Be as generous and as forgiving with me as I am with others. Wow, that's a good talking point. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Pastor Dirk Willner, and we're doing confirmation together, looking at the Lord's Prayer. In your journals, open it up to chapter 6. That's what we're having a look at this time. Forgive us our debts, forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us, or as it has here, as we also have forgiven our debtors. Sins and debt. Isn't that interesting? Forgive us our sins as we forgive others their sins. The connection between God and others is made yet again. Remember what Jesus said when he summed it all up? The question, well, tell us, what is this all about? And he said, love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now he's putting that in a very practical way. Forgive others just like you've been forgiven. The connection between what we have been given by God, grace, the forgiveness of our sins, his mercy, his love. Now pass that on to others. But the way that it's put is actually in another way. Forgive us our sins, forgive us our debts. God, do for us what we do for others. Now that's an interesting thing. It's like, rather than saying, oh, God has forgiven me my sins, now maybe I'll feel generous to do a little bit here and a little bit there. But no, he's actually saying it the other way around. The measure that you use for one another, the big or the little, is what we're asking God. Be as generous and as forgiving with me as I am with others. Wow, that's a good talking point. Have a look at the discussion on this page. And down the bottom here, the fifth petition, that's what we're looking at. Have you ever held a grudge? I'm sure you have. I have. Have you noticed that when we are holding a grudge, when we're angry about something that's happened to us with someone else, have you noticed that it's actually more about how it affects us rather than the other person? And how it gets around in your head at night time, in the morning, whenever you see the person, whenever even the name of the person comes up, whenever there's a thought, remembering all of those things, it's almost like it floods all the way back again. You're reliving the whole lot. And God is saying to us, forgiveness is in the real stuff of life, the messy part of life, all the stuff that hurts and is painful, everything that goes wrong. We ought to forgive one another. And here's probably the most bizarre thing that I can even share with you about this part of the Lord's Prayer. It's the most selfish thing, or the most self-healing thing. When we forgive others, we're letting go rather than holding on. A grudge, anger, and any of those kind of things is an emotional way in which we tie ourselves to what has happened. It's like the clutches are in there, and it has a hold on us. So it's almost like a contract. From now on, this is going to be my reality. I'm going to be fixated on this and that person and what they've done. And I, as pastor, know of people who are 70, 90 years old, and they're still thinking back on something that's happened to them when they were 7 or 9 or whatever age they were, because they never let go. They never, even as a Christian, really said, I'm going to let this go. So forgiveness is not so much about, oh, I'm going to forget about it. It's not for what forgiveness is. Remember, Jesus forgave us our sins. He didn't, on a fluffy cloud say, all right, bad idea, I'll just ignore what you're doing. No, Jesus actually come into our world and taken our sin upon himself and nailed it to the cross. So the cross is the place where our sin can go. When we say, forgive us our sins, we're saying there is actually a place where my sin can go. And when we are saying to other people, I forgive you, it's like saying to them, if you say it verbally or not, but in your heart, in your mind, you can say, I choose no longer to hold this against you because I need to be healed. I need to find this forgiveness for myself. And as I'm letting things go here, I know God has let things go between me and him. He's no longer holding those things against us, even though he could. Even though he could remember them. And he probably, when you think about it, knows everything about us. But forgiveness, even in the Psalms, talks about how when God forgives us, it's as far as the east is from the west. In other words, there's eternity in between. How far can you go from east to west? It's like just keeps on going out. So it's no longer here, it's gone somewhere else. And with Jesus, he's taken our sin, our debt, our financial debt, if you like. We're in debt. We can't pay it back. We can't pay it back to God. And the people around us who've done something, they can't take it back, can they? So it's been done. What are we going to do about the stuff that was done? Are we going to hold on to it, or are we going to let it go? Forgiveness, it's interesting now with the politics that we see around the Middle East, and people's lives are being ruined and people are being killed, and we see it on the news. Do we go with anger, or do we go with forgiveness? It's amazing how our default is to get angry about it. We want vengeance. We want to go in there and clobber them all. But forgiveness, that comes from somewhere else, because it's not really in us. So we need to have that understanding that God has forgiven us our sins, even though in the world there is so much bad stuff, that still, despite it all, God is asking us to forgive one another. Now, turn over to the next page. So what does this mean? Christ's model here of prayer, the fifth petition, teaches us to ask for forgiveness and for forgiveness to be given. It's an important thing here that God has made us and loves us and understands the power, the deadly power of unresolved anger. So we need to somehow find that resolving, that cleansing, that way of moving on. And that's what I'd like you to talk about. So you can do a little bit of Bible time here, role play, but look at the questions below. And these are the ones I want you to spend a bit of time thinking about. What does forgiveness have to do with mental and physical health? That's an interesting question. Is there a connection between holding a grudge and feeling the pain of it in your stomach and your headaches and the stress and all that sort of stuff that we carry with us in our mental and physical health? There's a direct connection here. And the second one, why do you think Jesus added, "Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us," to the Lord's Prayer? He could have sort of ignored that. Why put that in the prayer? And then the third one here, make a list of 2 people you need to forgive and 2 who need to forgive you. Speak about forgiveness in terms of the reality of your life. Talk to mum and dad about what's happening and where forgiveness seems to be knocking on your door, saying, there's stuff that I need to work through. But I'll let you talk about that now as you sit down and talk in the kitchen around with one another. Do the faith fives, your highs and your lows. What's going on in your life? Share with one another. At the end of it all, before we go and click on to the next week, as you go through, last day, have a look at the quiz. Ask one another these quiz questions. They're so simple, but sometimes they're very tricky. Helps us to remember some of the key words. And here you have some of the key words on the side, which gives you a little bit of a dictionary. You can write down those things there too. And just above here, you can see all these little sayings. They're actually quite good sayings sometimes. This one here from Corrie ten Boom. And she was imprisoned in the Nazi times and doing all of this kind of stuff. You can read about it. Google her name and find out her story. And this is what she says. It is not on our forgiveness that the world's healing hinges, but on His, meaning Christ. When He tells us to love our enemies, He gives along with the command, love, the love itself. So forgiveness and love are connected. And Jesus said, love your enemies, forgive those who hurt you. So that's really the stuff of what does Christianity mean in real life. Talk about it now. We'll see you next week. Bye.